This is what they did to him.
If your curiosity is aroused...
Stop!
Hi people, this is Giovanni Lombardo Radice from Stage Fright, and you are listening to the Hysteria Continues.
Yes, back to Italy for What Have They Done to Your Daughters, Massimo Dallamano's second in the often called Schoolgirls in Peril trilogy. So yes, back to Italy and back to some sleazy times in the mid-70s in Italy. So it's going to be a fun one to talk about. And we are joined by a friend of the show, Daniel, who last joined us for Elves. So What They've Done to Your Daughters is a very different proposition, Daniel, isn't it?
It has a little bit more artistic value, yes, sir.
Yes. And are you a fan of 70s Italian genre pictures?
Oh, certainly. My any listeners to my show know that all I want to do is watch Giallo. So happy to bring you something that kind of bridges the gap between the poliziotteschi and the Giallo and the slasher all at once.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. It's pretty much everything but kitchen sink, isn't it, this movie? It's kind of an interesting time in Italian genre cinema, quite a sort of transitional time with the kind of the waning popularity of the Giallo and the booming popularity of the poliziotteschi, the kind of the violent cop thrillers that kind of took their place, really. But it's got a bit of everything for everyone, sort of gore, sex, nudity, sleaze, slashings, car chases, you name it. It's got pretty much everything. So, yeah, looking forward to talking about that, Daniel. And are you keeping well?
Oh, everything's going well here in the good old United States. I mean, we've got at least 5 months left.
Well, that's a positive way to put a spin on it. Yes, indeed. So, and I know we're having a bit of a marathon session. One thing I'll just mention: Erik isn't with us this weekend, unfortunately. So he'll be back on the next show. So if they release him, but obviously I can't go into that for legal reasons. But Joseph, how are you doing?
I'm okay. How are you doing?
I'm not doing too badly, or it's quite warm here. So I'm sitting on a damp chair. That's not very appetizing, is it?
It's very warm here, but guess what? I've got my space heater on.
What is a space heater? Is that like an air conditioner?
Yeah, but it's a heater, and the reason why I have the heat on in this heat is because my office, there's a vent like in the ceiling, and you can't close it, so it's right above my computer desk, so it stays freezing. So to counteract that, I have like a space heater going while the air conditioner's going, so I can stay comfortable.
Wow,
it's all very weird and technical, but yeah,
that does sound complicated. But as long as you're comfortable, that is the main thing.
Yeah.
And Nathan, are you comfortable?
I'm very comfortable this morning.
I'm glad to hear. So, well, Daniel, as you've been on the show before, you know we start by just having a quick chat about what we watched recently. So, as our special guest, do you want to tell us, have you seen anything you'd like to tell us about?
Certainly. Just watched Door and Door 2, the Terror Vision Blu-ray releases. If you want to talk about two movies that go completely different directions using the same franchise IP, not unlike Solange and Daughters. Door 1, kind of a giallo-y tense thriller. Door 2, kind of 50 Shades in Tokyo. So that was unexpected. Really enjoyed that. And then saw Maxine when it came out. Did a double feature that night with Just Before Dawn. My local theater had a new restoration that Lieberman's running around. So it was fun to be one of, I think, 3 people in the audience who had seen Just Before Dawn amongst like 40 or 50 people, and getting to experience that movie again through their eyes as the big finale hits was worth every penny. My gosh.
So what was the kind of reaction to that finale, the kind of the fisting, as it were, finale?
It was, I think it was universally shock and then uncontrolled laughter.
Okay. I can imagine. It's funny, isn't it, with a film that you kind of know really well, and then sort of you show the reaction is kind of different for people who haven't seen it before. So that would be that'd be a fun one to see. And Door, the Japanese movies, aren't they?
Yes, they're both Japan, and The first one, I found it good. It was almost PG-13, hard PG-13, maybe, there's one bit at the end that's a little, definitely R. But up until the very finale, you're like, oh, this could be like, a modern PG-13. But the second one, my God, it is a different movie, and I was thankful.
Is it in a different movie? Because obviously the first one can be termed as kind of slasher movie, or sort of certainly adjacent. But presumably the second one isn't, or is it kind of more akin to the kind of Shannon Tweed style kind of American late night erotic thrillers?
It's definitely got a Skinamax vibe to it. There's some S&M, some prostitution ring manipulation going on. There's lots of kind of curious or boundary pushing sex for the 90s in very odd places and with very odd circumstances. I mean, they were really just shoehorning in the idea of a door just to call it Door 2. Kind of a Jason Goes to Hell, like, oh, let's make a movie about body swapping. Oh, God, we need a Jason movie. Okay, now it's Jason does the body swapping. Like, it was that. Is it
the same director?
No, different director, different cast. Really, I don't know enough about the Japanese production side to understand why it ended up called Door 2.
It could well be one like the Italians always were kind of sequelizing, renaming movies to appear to be sequels to popular movies like Alien on Earth, and I think Witch Story was Superstition 2, wasn't it? Of course, Zombie was Zombie 2
of course.
in Spain, Italy. Sorry. So could be one of those. But well, interesting. Anything else? What did you think of Maxine? Out of interest.
I thought it stuck the landing pretty well. I don't think that it could have ever achieved what I was hoping for after Pearl, but it was still very good. I guessed the twist 5 minutes in, and so I was like, okay, that's a shame. You hate that feeling of like, okay, and when are we going to show me that I'm right? And it's like, okay, well, but still well executed. Still, I like living in that world. It had that De Palma vibe, which I always love. So there was some Argento, some De Palma. And it still finished the story promised by X. So I'm not going to complain. I will watch it again. I'll buy it. I'm a fan. But did it do to me what Pearl did the first time I saw it? Or X? Well, probably not.
No, but that seems to be the consensus, really, isn't it? I mean, that was kind of what you thought, Joseph, wasn't it, when you wrote a review for Hysteria Lives, and you were kind of, you generally found it the kind of weaker of the three?
Yeah, it's definitely the weakest of the three. My problem is that I just don't care for the Maxine character. I loved Mia Goth as Pearl. And Mia Goth is still good as the Maxine character. I just don't like the character. And I don't know, I just felt like I wanted to be following someone else around through Maxine. And because a lot of characters are kind of waiting around for her to do something and she doesn't really do much, you get a lot of characters like, Giancarlo Esposito, who just kind of stand around doing nothing really. It looks great. The recreation of that time period of 1985, I think it is really, really well done. But I don't know, I'd rather watch X. X has the body count, Pearl has the heart, and Maxine doesn't really have enough of either. So, I'd rather watch the other two. It's not bad, but, definite step down.
Okay. Nathan, have you had a chance to catch it yet?
No, not yet. I want to, though.
Well, yes, I haven't seen it yet either, so we won't have any spoilers. But no, that's interesting. Is there anything else, Daniel, you want to tell us about?
I finally caught up with, and this is horrible because I'm a guy who runs a movie podcast. I finally saw Taxi Driver for the first time. I'd been holding out, trying to find it on 4K, and I didn't want to buy that giant set a couple of years ago with 10 movies in it just for Taxi Driver. So finally caught that. And much like Maxine, I spent the first hour of the movie loving it. I want to live in this world, this sleazy New York of the 80s and 70s. Yes, put me in it. But I felt like it didn't stick the landing at all for me. And maybe I just need to let it percolate in my brain for a couple of months and rewatch it. But it was two movies. The movie I loved and then the rest of it.
I haven't seen it for a long time, and I'm trying to think because I've been rewatching some kind of prestige movies, I can guess call them, from the 70s, like The Godfather, which I kind of, watching it again, well, I realised I hadn't actually seen it. So I think there's, so working my way through, and Taxi Driver was another one that I'm kind of, is on the list. And it's just because I've seen so many clips from these movies over the years that memory may be playing tricks on me to think I've seen it before. So I kind of think I have seen Taxi Driver before, but not for many years. So it'd be interesting to sort of catch up with it at some point. But yeah, see if I share your opinion.
How did you like Godfather, finally seeing it for the first time?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's kind of very, arguably it's kind of, over long. It doesn't really need to be, especially like the first 40 minutes is the kind of wedding party at the beginning. And you just think, does this really need to? But then, of course, I don't know. I enjoyed it. I mean, I think it was exceptional piece of filmmaking. Can
I ruin The Godfather for you real quick?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so we did this on our show a couple of years ago. And if you've ever have a chance, there's a novel of The Godfather. And you know the scene at the beginning of The Godfather where you see the woman at the wedding kind of doing the Subway $5 footlong thing with her hands, showing how big a penis would be? And this is true. I'm not making this up. There's a B plot or a C plot in the Godfather novel that spans the entire book, from the beginning of the book through the end, about a woman who has an abnormally large vaginal cavity, and she can only be loved by Sonny because he has a giant penis. And then, after Sonny is, spoilers, murdered, there is a doctor in the book who's like a plastic surgeon who changes her anatomy to basically fit himself. And now he, much like Cinderella in that glass slipper, and her can be perfectly paired.
Well, they didn't have that in the movie, did they?
They left that on the cutting room floor, and it bums me out. It would have. No, I love that movie, and I love it more than Godfather 2. People say 2's better. They're wrong. Godfather 1, wonderful. But thank God they cut that out of the movie.
Yeah, well, given how long the movie was, they probably would have spent 40 minutes talking about her vagina if they had included it. So it's probably for the best.
Oh my gosh.
So, is anything else? I mean, obviously, we're going to be the Taxi Driver got into controversy for the scenes with Jodie Foster playing the child prostitute. And obviously there's some comparisons in some ways to the film we're covering today with some of the subject matter. But is there anything else you sort of want to mention?
Yeah, the last thing, I did finally watch Blue Sunshine. Synapse put it out here in the States. You know, it's okay. It's got it shows Lieberman has potential as a filmmaker. I don't know that it grabbed me as much as Just Before Dawn. But because that's been out, Synapse has been more kind of loose-lipped about their plans, and they said that they're doing a new restoration on Just Before Dawn, and it'll be out sometime when they find better materials or whatever. So the movie, Blue Sunshine, it's fine. Check it out. It's cool. But just that it coming out and Lieberman being in the conversation again, for them to admit that they've got work going on a Just Before Dawn and it's kind of progressing makes me very, very happy.
That's intriguing, isn't it? I wonder if there's any kind of lost elements.
That's I think the exact issue. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Because I know Just Before Dawn was started as a kind of a very different script, didn't it? And Lieberman kind of rewrote it. But I mean, I haven't seen Blue Sunshine for a number of years. Probably I used to have the VHS way back in the midst of time, but I always remember being freaked out by the kind of the Manson-esque sort of bald-headed. You know, basically people take bad acid, don't they? And all their hair falls out, and they suddenly, years later, they have a flashback and turn homicidal.
It had some interesting supplements too. Some like films of the 60s on LSD, and like to try to scare students away from it and stuff. It's a cool package. I recommend it.
Cool. Okay. And somebody I know who likes their substances, Nathan, have you ever seen Blue Sunshine?
I have. And yeah, I really enjoyed Blue Sunshine, although it's been a very long time since I've seen it. And obviously, me being a slasher fan, if I'm going to watch a Jeff Lieberman movie, it's going to be Just Before Dawn.
Well, Satan's Little Helper as well.
Yeah, I like Satan's Little Helper a lot.
What about you, Joseph? Are you a fan of Blue Sunshine?
Yeah, I like it. I haven't seen it in a while, but I do remember. I think of all his films, it's probably my least favorite that he did. back in the day. But yeah, I like it.
Well, it'll be an interesting one to cover on the on Patreon at some point. But no, well, thank you, Daniel. So thank you very much for that. Well, Joseph, have you got anything you want to tell us about?
Other than Maxine, I don't think I've seen anything else.
Okay, I know we're cramming a lot in, as it were. And we've got some more commentary tracks to announce. I'm not sure we can do them yet. I'm not sure what has been announced, what hasn't yet. But
we're going to need a novel to announce all of them.
Well, the next one we're recording is for an early '80s slasher. Let's put it that way. So we're quite excited for that. So, but we've got quite a few in the bag. Quite a mixed bag of things, everything from, all slasher related. So, yeah, when we can announce it, we will do. But Nathan, how about you? Has you seen anything?
Last night I watched Abigail.
Oh, yeah.
The one where the group of criminals kidnap the daughter of this really rich guy and a bunch of crazy stuff goes down. I should say that, like, in every trailer and review, it pretty much gives away, like, the biggest, like, I guess, quote unquote twist in the movie. Like, everything ruins it. And when I was watching it, I kept thinking to myself, this would have been so much better if I didn't know, what was going to happen. But I've noticed that, there's a lot of trailers that do that, of course, give away way too much about the film. But yeah, the movie itself, I really enjoyed. I thought it was really entertaining. Not too serious of a movie, of course. It's very tongue-in-cheek, I would say. But, I thought it was a lot of fun. All the performances was fun. It's pretty bloody. It's got a lot of gore in there that was, it's always welcome, in my opinion. But, yeah, I liked it a lot, actually.
Cool. Have you seen that, Daniel? Have you seen Abigail?
Well, I saw the trailer, so I feel like I've already seen it.
Yeah.
It looked great. And I like that Melissa Barrera, I think, the one from Scream that is no longer in Scream. She's really good. So I will eventually watch that movie.
What about you, Joseph? Have you caught up with that yet?
No, does that have anything to do with the Kevin James movie where the little girl's out in the woods and she makes mincemeat of them?
No, that's a totally different movie.
Okay.
This is kind of reminding me. I have seen it, but it's a few months back. I can't when it first came out, but it kind of reminded me a little bit. It's got that kind of 80s horror vibe to it a little bit. But without giving any. Well, it's like you say, if you've seen the trailer, you'll know what a twist is. But if you want to go into it fresh after hearing us talk about it briefly here, then best to go in without checking the trailer out.
Yeah, I wouldn't look at any reviews. Nothing.
Well, I just kind of a couple of things I mentioned. First one I watched was Revenge of the Stepford Wives. So it's very, as you can probably imagine, I think it's from '87, was it? But it's very cheesy in a fun way. I mean, essentially, kind of like it's remaking the first movie to some degree, where Sharon Gless goes to the town of Stepford, and she's a reporter, and she wants to report on the town where there's no violence and no crime. And to see what the recipe is for everyone to be so well-adjusted and sort of peaceful. And then while she's there, everyone's still dressing like in Laura Ashley 70s abominations, and then housewives start malfunctioning. So it's kind of hitting the same beats as the original 70s movie, but it was fun. It had some sort of pretty cheesy moments, which I appreciated. Nathan, I imagine that's one you've seen.
Oh, yes. I loved it just because it's totally different, I guess, in tone from the first one. It just takes this like ridiculously cheesy like route with it. And that's what I love. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of it just because of how ridiculous it is.
Daniel, have you seen that one?
No, I'm unfamiliar with the entire Stepford extended universe, actually.
So you've not seen the first Stepford Wives?
No, that's one I've missed.
Okay. I mean, it's kind of got a bit of a sci-fi thing, but it's kind of interesting in sort of it's almost kind of like a pre-Handmaid's Tale style thing.
Certainly.
All like the house, yeah, but without giving too much away. You probably wouldn't need to go into it kind of fresh. But and Joseph, have you ever caught up with that?
Yeah, I've seen all of them. The one you just talked about, I've only seen it once, so I don't really remember enough to comment.
Okay, right. Well, the last thing I was going to mention was being on a bit of a Massimo Dallamano kick. I had some friends over and we watched Dorian Gray, or The Sins of Dorian Gray, from 1970 with Helmut Berger playing the eponymous role of Dorian Gray. Also with Herbert Lom and Margaret Lee kind of along for the ride. So I think I'm right in thinking this was made before Solange, which is 72, wasn't it? Solange, I think.
Yep.
So this was released in 1970. So it's kind of Massimo Dallamano gearing up on his kind of boundary pushing kind of sexuality and kind of sleazy sides of things. So it's a very kind of sexed up and very early 70s kind of version of the famous Oscar Wilde novel, where Helmut Berger plays this, obviously, Dorian Gray, who then goes to the dark side and he commits all these sins, inverted commas, which some of them wouldn't necessarily be counted as sins, but things like sort of taking a matronly old lady up the bum in a stable was one of the ones where a horse looks on, and there's all sorts of things where he then goes on cruising, picking up men in toilets, and taking loads of drugs and just things like that, which all kind of probably was quite shocking back in the early 70s. And there's a great bit in it where Herbert Lom steps into the shower with Dorian Gray after he drops the soap. So it's kind of and then Margaret Lee has a kind of a little lesbian frottage after she gets rejected by Dorian Gray. But it's all pretty mild, really. But it kind of hints at the kind of boundary pushing that would happen with Solange, and then especially with what they've done to your daughters, and then the Red Rings of Fear, which are the closure of the Schoolgirls in Peril trilogy, which didn't have Massimo Dallamano. He kind of had a hand in the screenplay, but he died in a car crash a couple of years before that came out. So, but yes. So, well, that kind of leads us. Well, before I talk about that, actually, I was going to ask you, Daniel, if you'd seen The Sins of Dorian Gray.
I saw Dorian Gray years ago. The thing that always struck me about it was, like you said, it was hinting. If you gave me that list of quote unquote sins that you just listed off and didn't tell me how graphic or not graphic the presentation was, I would have thought you were talking about a movie from 77, like the late porno giallo era. And so it's not just where Massimo's going, it's where the whole industry is going to go in Italy 5 years from now. So it's there early, and it's kind of, if I remember right, kind of a softer take on it. You don't really have the graphic. This isn't giallo in Venice, right? Like this is the same kind of subject matter, just presented in a more kind of closer to soft way. But it's still like ticking all the boxes that by the late 70s, the Italian filmmakers are like, oh God, we need people in seats. Let's put some more boobs in it. Let's put some more sodomy or whatever. They're throwing all these things at the wall, trying to get people to come to the theater.
Yeah, it's not explicit really in any way. I mean, it's kind of most of it's kind of hinted. And there's lots of doors slowly closing and obscuring views and things like that. And of course, being 1970 and sort of you still got that hangover from the 60s, that kind of psychedelia and, all, drugs being shocking and all those kind of things. But yeah, no, it's a fun time. My friends enjoyed it. But I kind of guess that neatly leads us on to our main pick. So police investigate apparent suicide of a teenage girl and uncover details of a teenage prostitution racket. They go on the hunt for a motorcycle riding killer. So that's the very brief synopsis from IMDb. Obviously, the plot is a bit more intricate than that. I'll come on. I'll talk to you in a moment, Daniel, because obviously this is your suggestion. But just to sort of mention, I'd say this is. I've probably seen this movie quite a few times. It's going to be an interesting one to discuss because, as we mentioned, it kind of bridges the giallo, which was kind of, as we know, that kind of the Dario Argento style black glove killer that originated in 1970 with the bird with the crystal plumage, and by 1974 the giallo's fortunes are kind of waned. I think 72 was probably the height of the giallo. And what had kind of taken over were these polizioteschi movies, which were kind of violent police cop procedural dramas, quite often going after, usually starring people like Fabio Testi, and lots of motorcycle chases, car chases, beating up bad guys, really envelope pushing when it comes to violence, which is something you probably wouldn't have seen in the late 60s. And as Daniel mentioned, it was the Italians were really pushing the envelope and really pushing boundaries as we got into the 70s. So this movie followed on from what they'd done to Solange, which of course also starred Fabio Testi, and in that one, it's got the image always burnt into my mind of the X-ray of the young woman who had a pair of scissors shoved up her vagina, and so. But with this movie, they kind of. They basically kind of I was going to say that you can't really say that a movie that's got a pair of scissors shoved up a vagina is kind of cautious or kind of sensitive in any ways, but certainly as we get to 1974. It's even more explicit in what we see in this, and it's a kind of something that the film actually has a joke itself with, in so much that it starts with them finding a body of a teenage girl, 15 years old, who's been found hung and naked in a bedroom, and it looks like a staged suicide. And they even on the front page of the newspaper, when they're looking at it, they actually have a whole image of her naked body hanging there. I don't know if that was kind of a sly dig by the filmmakers about the kind of exploitation and sensationalization of kind of Italian crime, but Italy at that time was mired in huge amounts of violence, from gang sort of cult violence, kind of political violence. And it seems to be quite interesting during times of strife and political and social unrest that the horror movie seems to offer a way out for audiences, even if they're not necessarily to avoid the horrors in their daily lives, but actually go and see horrors happening to other people, and it's some way of perhaps cathartically dealing with that. So this movie seems to be sending itself out to shock, and I imagine it would have shocked quite a few people in Italy at the time, that you're talking about subject matter that you just wouldn't really see in a thriller today, of a kind of a prostitution racket, schoolgirls, all kind of 15 years or so old, and being exploited by kind of older men, and going into quite sort of graphic details about what happens to them. I think there's the police say that the first schoolgirl who's found dead had traces of sperm in her stomach, her vagina, and her anus. So it's not really, I was going to say, not exactly beating around the bush. That's probably not the best term to use, but it's it really is kind of really pushing that envelope, and there's obviously something going on in Italy at the time to satisfy that kind of that interest in these kind of more prurient sort of details. And I think I also mentioned the movie is this mixture. It's kind of, let's say, everything but the kitchen sink. It has the giallo elements. You've got the motorcycle, helmeted and black leather clad killer, who is chasing around, chopping people's hands off, and chasing people through underground car parks with a meat cleaver, very much kind of like a sort of the giallo, but also like in a kind of proto-slasher way. Then you have the polizioteschi, which is the kind of the grizzled police officers on the case, who are basically jaded and seen it all. Then you also have, of course, all the kind of the car chases, chasing a motorcyclist. It's all the kind of things. Everything's thrown in there, plus kind of some sex, some gore effects, violence. You basically got everything. It's kind of it's a very kind of potent melting pot of kind of Italian genre exploitation. So yes, Daniel, you chose this for us. So I'm interested in hearing why. Why did you choose this for us?
So I know that you guys had already talked about Solange. I'm a big fan of Dallamano. I'm a big fan of Fabio Testi. But maybe even more than that, I'm a fan of Claudio Casanelli. I feel like he's a guy who we don't talk about, even within like the nerds who talk about Giallo, as like a really strong leading man, mostly because he only really came onto the scene post Giallo while it was kind of is it Polizioteschi? Are we doing like monster movies? Like who is Claudio Castanelli going to be in this genre? And then they killed him in a helicopter crash in the 80s before he ever like fully ascended to stardom. But this, I feel like, is his strongest performance. He's cool like all the time, you know, everything he does. So it's a good showcase for him. This movie's insane. Like, we talk about what it would have shocked audiences in the 70s. I've showed this to a bunch of people, and it shocks everybody now. We watched it this week with a couple of friends, and the comment was, this could be made today and still kind of fit like everything we're still talking about with controversies over all these different issues, and then, you know, the trafficking and the awful, you know, it's one of those movies, it's 50 years old, still relevant today, still shocking today. And it's an interesting exercise in how much sleaze can we pack into a movie and have it be the least sexy movie you've ever seen. And it's an interesting experiment in that way.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because it isn't a sexy movie.
There is no titillation in this movie at all. It is only the opposite. It is the stomach churning kind.
Yeah, so it is interesting. I mean, I at least, I mean, with Solange, it was kind of that was kind of its time, wasn't it? 72 was the height of the giallo, and had much more of a kind of a traditional giallo kind of sort of plot, and also had that kind of beauty to it as well, didn't it? Set in England and all the kind of sun-dappled, like they're going boating, and you know, even with the revelation of the killer, everything was kind of shot beautifully. Whereas this is far more kind of it's still beautiful. I mean, I really like the way that Dallamano shoots when the killer turns up. Everything's shot in this kind of almost kind of fisheye lens, kind of, and it kind of adds that kind of weirdness, or it kind of elevates it to some degree. So yeah, it's got lots of interesting things to chat about with this. But I know somebody who is not a fan of police procedurals, which of course this has quite a lot of, and that's Nathan Johnson. So Nathan, how did you find what they've done to your daughters? Was it a first time watch for you, or have you seen it before?
This was a first time watch for me. Now I had seen, What Have You Done to Solange? I had seen it before, but I will admit that what kind of steered me away from this one was that I had read that it, focuses a lot on the police procedural part. And, for me, I mean, it's not that I don't enjoy that. It's just that more often than not, I find myself a little bored by that aspect of the movie. I kind of prefer the more, I guess, horror aspects rather than the investigation behind it. But I will say that in defense of this movie, like, I actually think they blended it very well. I didn't find myself bored, which, is a huge compliment. Because, I found it, fairly entertaining throughout. Obviously the killer's get up, of course, reminds me of Strip Nude for Your Killer, Night School, what's the Welcome to Spring Break. So yeah, I mean, that's always fun. And I did love the big finale with, the chase and all that. I thought that was a lot of fun as well. But yeah, I mean, the movie itself, it's just, it's kind of like you guys said, like, it's not what you would consider in a typical, I guess, giallo, like a very sexy film. I agree with Daniel. It's basically the opposite of that, 100%. One thing I wanted to say, though, is I did love the fact that they had, a woman in the, the detective role. I thought that, she was very good. And, it's a little different because, usually you just see men in, the detective roles in these movies. So, I always like seeing, things like that in these movies from the 70s. Overall, I would say, while I don't think it's, I guess, quite as good as Solange, I found the mystery in that one, I guess a little bit more intriguing. But that's not to say this is a bad movie whatsoever, because it's not a bad movie. It's actually really good. And I would say for anyone out there that's like me and is unsure about the whole police angle of it, give it a shot, because I don't think you'll regret it.
Cool. Excellent. Well, I'm glad that didn't put you off. So, I agree. I mean, I think it's there's some other movies that delve much more into the police procedural side of things. and this keeps a kind of a fair clip.
They strike a good balance in this one.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you, Nathan. Joseph, what are your thoughts on the movie?
Yeah, I thought it was okay, but it's kind of, for me, these movies are kind of just like in one ear, out the other. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't know, like, I found this one kind of bleak, and because it's both a giallo and a poliziesque, I don't know, for me, I found it kind of like jarring. Like, 1 minute you've got that really cool scene with the kind of the jigsaw body part thing going on, and then in the next thing you got like a motorcycle chase, and it's like that happens a lot in a lot of giallo films, but not really to this kind of extent. And I don't know, for me, I'm one of those people who's not necessarily a huge fan of the giallo subgenre. Certainly not a huge fan of the 70s stuff. I mean, I appreciate them. I like to look at them, and I've liked a lot of them, but they're not movies I kind of go back to, and that's the kind of stuff I don't know, I just find myself gravitating towards, and I don't find movies like this have that kind of replay value. I can appreciate it for what it is, and I think it does look good. I love that oppressive 70s vibe going on here. It's not, like you said, it's not as sunny as your typical kind of giallo from this era, or from this kind of where it's set. It has like a, oh my God, it's about to rain kind of atmosphere going on, which I kind of like, actually. But I don't know. The story kind of went in one ear and out the other. I don't remember much about it, if I'm honest, and I've watched it twice this week. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to condemn it, but I don't want to recommend it either. So I'll just say middle of the road for me. I'm not the best person in the world to review a giallo. They really have to do something extremely special to get my attention. And this one, it had its moments, but it just didn't really do much for me, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. Well, it can't be everyone's cup of tea. I mean, one thing that I always find interesting, that kind of talking about it being jarring. I mean, it is a bleak movie in a lot of ways, and arguably, the central mystery is weaker than Solange and weaker than many other gialli. And in fact, actually, I don't know what you think, Daniel, but watching it again, it doesn't really feel like the Massimo Dallamano was particularly actually that interested in the mystery angle. Because really, at the end, it's just a anonymous group of dirty old men, isn't it? It's not really. There's no great
akin to an episode of the X-Files from like the middle of the show. I don't know if you guys were X-Files fans, but at some point the show would give you like your weekly procedural for whatever alien type thing they were investigating, but then also it would uncover little hints toward this great conspiracy that would be an overarching plot. And so in a world where they make, instead of red rings of doo-doo that they're going to make next, if they made a proper sequel or two to this movie, you could see where they would go to try to like work to take down this ring of, powerful men who are doing these horrible things to people.
So I actually had a question. Was this an actual sequel to Solange, or was it just kind of in name only?
Yeah.
It's in name only, really, isn't it? I mean, it's the same director.
Yeah, I mean, I knew all that, but I didn't know if it was like, it had any follow through. I didn't really pick up on anything.
No, it's more like a spiritual
plot
sequel.
wise.
I mean, at this point, I'm trying to think of any major sequelitis, because this is still around the time of like Jaws. Is this pre-Jaws 2, probably? It's before Jaws 2, it's before Friday 2. We're not really into the, so it's more like just similar in scope, and then a lot of the production folks are the same. Although, the one thing it's missing from Solange that I think would have put it over the top is, of all people, this is the first time in history anyone's ever said the thing it was missing in Minute. Joe D'Amato. I feel like the cinematography in this from Coley is like, it's good. And you can tell when because Massimo himself was a former cinematographer. So you've got like, good shots in this movie, but then you've got some kind of basic shots. Whereas in Solange, I think the thing that put it over the top for me at the time was the constant beautiful shots that Joe D'Amato is bringing to the fore here. So that's the one thing I could say, like, this movie compared to its predecessor, where there's a step down, would be the cinematography.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Joe D'Amato was like, better known as cinematographer before. Obviously, he's better known now for as a director of films like Absurd, which itself is kind of quite a grungy looking. It's difficult to believe that was made by the same person who shot Solange, but. It's the other thing it was kind of I always find kind of interesting in these movies is that you've got this incredibly ugly subject matter and this kind of bleakness to it, and then it's kind of you've got juxtaposed with like the beautiful score by Stelvio Cipriani, which it still has that feel of those kind of earlier gialli that Ennio Morricone and Stelvio Cipriani were excelled at, but that kind of slightly breathy abstract female singing.
Yeah,
so which I kind of guess in this it was similar. It was kind of meant to indicate kind of young girls singing. I kind of guess, but it's kind of I say one of the most beautiful scores ever is another for Cannibal Holocaust, which is one of the ugliest movies ever made. So the Italians certainly loved doing that juxtaposition between kind of ugliness and sleaze and things on screen with this very beautiful soundtracks. Whether or not a film if you actually had a film that was very bleak and sparse kind of soundtrack, that may not have worked either. I don't know, but I'm kind of guessing. I mean, you're talking about sequels, and they say that I can't think of a single sequel to a giallo from the 70s. Going forward, that they just didn't. Basically, I could guess it hadn't occurred to them, but I presume that the money men would have said to Massimo Dallamano, we made a shitload of money on Solange. You can't really make a sequel to it, but can you do something that's spiritually similar, but also in keeping with whatever's popular at the time?
Yeah. What else you got?
Yeah, what else have you got? So it's kind of it's a lot of the earlier 70s gialli. There was kind of there isn't so much cynicism in them, whereas that by you get into mid 70s Italian cinema. There's a lot of cynicism, there's a lot of anger at society, at the kind of the police, at government, at politicians, corruption, all this kind of thing. And so it's very much reflected. This kind of reflects the times in Italy, which were, I mean, one of the things in this they show the riot scene, don't they? When they're looking to see. They see the young schoolgirl who was killed in the first off, and who her boyfriend. At the time, in this kind of riot scene, and kind of Italy, say, was in, violence was kind of rife there on the streets. So, yeah, so it's definitely a reflection of its time. But I mean, I haven't seen Red Rings of Fear for a long time, but that I was mentioned it stars Fabio Tessi, and again, that was another film that there's not really a direct sequel, it's more of a spiritual sequel, isn't it? I guess in the same way as the Dario Argento, like they kind of loosely termed the Animal trilogy of his first three movies. They're not sequels to each other, but I kind of guess they are similar in some ways. And so thematically, you've got the whole basically schoolgirls in peril. Have you seen Red Rings of Fear recently, Daniel?
I have, and I do not necessarily recommend it. I love Fabio Testi. I love a good sleazy movie. But man, there's something about... Okay, actually, you know what? I take that back. I highly recommend it. Everybody who liked Solange especially needs to check out Red Rings of Fear. Also, if you liked Sister of Ursula, but you thought it had too much going on, like in the... cerebral space, and you're like, man, if I didn't have to think so hard, I'd like this movie better. Red Rings of Fear, it's yours.
Well, what a recommendation. So, I mean, maybe covering that at some point. But,
are we talking about the movie or Erik getting out of the shower?
Yes, poor Eric's not here to defend himself, but he will be back. Yeah, is there anything else you want to sort of mention? Obviously, you can in context, but there's kind of some interesting sort of background to this, and also kind of how influential this movie was going forward, arguably.
Yeah, I wanted to point out the Cipriani score. It has elements of what Solange had from its score, but it also has like more of an action vibe. And when it really kicks off, the melody of the rhythm part is actually very similar to Last Resort by Papa Roach. And so my dumb, went to college in the 2000s brain kept like having that song get stuck in my head thinking about the score to this movie. So check that out, guys. It's hilarious.
No thanks.
But one thing about this movie that just weirds me out. Now we talked about the X-ray from Solange, and the image when I first watched Solange years ago was not necessarily X-ray. It was the cut from the X-ray to the grieving father's face at the funeral. I thought, like, oh my God, what are we doing with this movie? Like, you're just punching people right in the gut. Like, this is gross. Well, that guy shows up as the attorney in this movie. And so having watched him back to back to prepare for this, I was like, oh my God, grieving father is now sleazy attorney. Like, high five to the directors. That was a good idea. That made me feel good that he at least continued on with his life after the tragedy of the first one.
Well, yes. So it's fun spotting some of the cast in this, isn't it, and seeing what else they've been in. I mean, obviously, a lot of them have been turned up in other things. One thing that kind of I always thought was funny, and I did sort of recognise her. That it was Sherry Buchanan who plays Sylvia Polversi, I think, I don't know how to pronounce that, but who is the basically the kind of the schoolgirl that kicks it all off, the one they find dead. And she was an American actress who'd moved to Rome to pursue a modelling career, and then kind of fell into kind of roles in Italian exploitation and horror movies. And you may remember, well, I kind of remember her best from Zombie Holocaust, about 6 years after this. But she turned up in a number of these films, so it was kind of interesting to see. And also Farley Granger, who, of course, slasher fans may remember best for his role in kind of pivotal role in The Prowler in 1981. But he'd also obviously came to prominence. Probably his best known role was in Rope, the Alfred Hitchcock movie from 1948. But he also had made a kind of a bit of a career in Italy, and he was in a number of kind of gialli, including The Slasher as a Sex Maniac, which is another gialli that kind of pushes the boundaries and is definitely going for that kind of almost pushing into almost kind of porno territory. And actually, funny thing, I was going to ask you, Daniel, I don't know if you know about this or any of you other guys know about this, but I was looking into this. There is kind of a missing reel of footage that was shot to be included in this movie of a man in a kabuki mask being already pleasured by young women. And I'm presuming it was meant to be dropped in as kind of maybe they found a reel or something like that, which it wasn't used, and apparently it was kind of pushing kind of hardcore territory. So it was shot for this movie but never used. Did you know anything about that, Daniel?
Okay, so guys, I was talking about this with my buddy. I was like, we're not even going to watch this because it's too gross. But our dear friends at Arrow on the Blu-ray have included I don't remember how many, but a number of cut hardcore scenes, which, was kind of the style at the time for the Italians to like snip in hardcore inserts to turn a softcore movie into a hardcore movie to sell it to certain theaters or whatever. I don't know for sure. It would be purely speculation on my part, but I'm assuming at some point the script called for, instead of the audio recordings that we have to hear over and over again in this disgusting movie, I'm assuming at some point there were going to be video recordings, because what I remember is really old gross dudes and like middle-aged women who were probably supposed to be the girls in the ring, but they're obviously like 50. It's gross. It's on the Arrow Blu-ray. You're welcome to watch it, but I did not revisit those in preparation for this episode because they're gross.
Well, fair enough. It's funny. It would say, I think it was because The Slasher as a Sex Maniac was released to screens. Was it called? Was it Penetration? I think maybe been the hardcore. Yeah, the hardcore title, and that had lots of hardcore inserts. So Paul Farley Granger, respected actor who was in the Hitchcock movie, was into gialli that were kind of at least one that was released as a hardcore porno, and sounds like this one was potentially going to be. He was also in Amok with Barbara Boucher from early 1972, I think, which has the AKA of Hotbed of Sex, which was a great title. But you mentioned Claudio Casanelli, who died in a helicopter crash, didn't he, in 1985 while filming in the United States. So it kind of sort of brings to mind, obviously they didn't learn anything from the death on the Twilight Zone movie from a couple of years before that. And of course, Massimo Dallamano also died in a car crash, didn't he? Was it a couple of years after making this?
A couple of years after making this, yeah, and it's one of those tragic things where you just never know. But I mean, you think about the woman who was Jess Franco's muse in the early days, who died in a car crash. Like, it's just one of those facts of modern life. You know, you're gonna lose people sometimes when you're not ready to lose them. But Casanelli is so good in if you've seen Murder Rock, I'm sure you guys have already covered that. But
yes,
the bloodless Fulci, you know, he's just so good, man. And it's a shame that a lot of his early career is crap, like The Great Alligator, you know. And it's like, oh, okay, what potential does this guy really have? I don't know.
Yeah, he was in, after this, he was in, I haven't seen it, but Suspicious Death of a Minor, a year later. Which,
actually, we need to talk about that, because imagine Sergio Martino saw Deep Red and was like, oh, Deep Red, this is cutting edge. We should do something like this. And then he was like, well, what are we going to do? Oh, we should watch What Have They Done to Your Daughters, but do it funny and with a Deep Red score. Like, it's essentially a remake of this movie that we just watched.
Okay. But is it a recommend?
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I mean, it's
okay.
not as good as this, but it's also not as bleak as this. So for those who are turned off by the fact that this movie makes you just want to go to bed and take a shower, like, it's still got a lot of the grossness, and some of it's probably even played up beyond what this movie did. It's trying to be a little more titillating, but like, if I remember right, they even kind of replicate the silly cars falling apart chase scene from Deep Red again, almost shot for shot, while also ripping this movie off. It's very strange. And it stars the same guy. So that's a weird one. Check that out.
Okay, I'd heard it was kind of a giallo-esque, but obviously in the same way as this movie is. But I mean, I looked at some of the Italian newspapers around the time, because the original title translates as "The Police Are Asking for Help." So it's La Polizia chiede aiuto. I can't pronounce. I can speak Spanish, but I can't really speak Italian. But I looked up in the movie page in 1974 in La Stampa, the Italian newspaper. And funnily enough, there was on at the same time there was a re-release of Dario Argento's Bird with a Crystal Plumage, so that was in re-release at the time. But also Eloy de Iglesias' Cannibal Man was out at the same time, the Spanish horror movie, which had been retitled and to look like a giallo. In fact, actually, the advertising for it was calling it a giallo, and had a picture of a woman, a semi-naked woman lying back with somebody with a massive axe hanging over her head. So obviously, the giallo was still popular enough. And of course, like you say, this is the year before Deep Red, which kind of was I kind of guess in some ways the last hurrah for kind of a bigger budgeted, kind of higher profile gialli in Italy. And going forward to this, as you mentioned, Giallo a Venezia, kind of probably the sleaziest of all the gialli movies, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, it is a dumpster fire. I mean, but it's fun to watch. That's the difference, right? Like, I like showing What Have They Done to Your Daughters to my friends, because I can say, look at how good and modern this movie is. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry I didn't warn you. It's really sad and gross. But like Venezia, you really have to watch who you show it to. But the folks who will appreciate such an insane romp will thank you.
Yes. So, we haven't covered that one on the podcast. I don't know if we'll ever get around to that.
Guys,
but
guys.
Yes, well, maybe at some point. But so is there anything else you wanted to add, Daniel, sort of that maybe we haven't covered?
I think we've covered all the main things that I wanted to get out there. You know, the score is goofy. The action's super dangerous. The stuntmen at this time in Italy are insane. You know, you get used to like the CGI American car chases, and then even the old American car chases are fast and cool, but like the literal danger of cars skidding in gravel as they swing toward actors, like, holy crap, these people are in danger.
There was, I can't remember the actor. I've seen a clip online. It was is it John Paul Belmondo, who was like the French actor, and he was in the French had a kind of similar sort of thing going on in the mid 70s, a kind of violent police sort of cop movies, and with Alain Delon and various people. And I can't remember the name of the movie, but I remember there's a clip online where he falls down this in this quarry, and he's going down this slope, and he's kind of running down, and there's boulders coming down behind him. And obviously, there's no way they could have faked it. It's just like if it had been out half an inch, he would have been squashed under a boulder. So it is kind of crazy to look at some of these movies now and just think. And also, of course, what happened to Claudia Casanelli? You know, he did literally die in a stunt gone wrong. So yeah, it's a very dangerous time to be a stuntman.
Last thing I had on my list of things to cover with you guys. This movie, obviously, like 8 years before Tenebrae, but they do the same diegetic music trick from Tenebrae. You remember the big long shot outside the building in Tenebrae, and then it cuts inside, and it turns out the score that we've been hearing that whole time was coming from a record player, because she lifts the needle and it cuts the sound. Did the same trick 8 years earlier in this movie, and I thought that was pretty cool. Like, oh yeah, I mean, that's like next level kind of, director putting his work in kind of scene.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because Dario Argento had he kind of was quite a magpie in so much he did pick up stuff. And funnily enough, we talked to just kind of leads on very quickly to the influence on this, and we sort of mentioned that I think this is probably the first movie that had a motorcycle helmeted killer, and obviously Strip Nude for Killer followed, which is another kind of sleazy delight. But then we covered Night School. The Ken Hughes Boston set slasher from 1981, where the killer is wearing motorcycle leathers and a helmet. And interestingly, this movie, like many Italian genre movies, it did get a US cinema release. It got released, I think, earlier as What They'd Done to Your Daughters, but then it got a re-release in 1980 under the title The Coed Murders. With a fantastic poster, which makes basically of a woman in a bath screaming, and somebody holding a kind of a hatchet with a pair of gloves, and it was obviously done to sort of capitalize on that kind of post-Halloween audience to make it look like an early 80s slasher movie. But what was interesting was when I was looking to Night School was the comparisons between the Giallo and Night School, which is kind of set up as a kind of an American Giallo. And I thought it probably wasn't beyond the realm of reason that the people, Ruth Avagnon and the other producer, may have seen this movie and sort of taken some ideas from it. And then funnily enough, also the fact that Dario Argento seemed to have borrowed elements for a Night School for Tenebrae, which was kind of including the infamous hand chopping with Veronica Lazo towards the end of the movie, was kind of more or less a recreation of the scene in the aquarium in Night School. So there's lots of cross fertilization going on there. But Nathan, have you got anything to add, or have we taken all your background?
No.
Okay. What about you, Joseph? Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, everything you and Daniel just discussed, I had written down.
Right.
No, I got nothing else. No.
But of course. So I was trying to think. I think this movie was quite a big hit in Italy, but obviously it led to a sequel, belated sequel, sort of. And that was 1978, wasn't it? Red Rings of Fear. But yes. So what was the kind of consensus on the group, Joseph?
I was going to say, I thought it was 1974.
What's that?
Eric was born in 1974.
Oh, what, the Red Rings of Fear? Oh, poor Erik, not being here to defend himself.
Yeah, a less than ideal 8 comments for What Have They Done to Your Daughters. And here's 3 from the 8. Dave Felter from Facebook says, not as giallo-y as its predecessor. It's half police procedural, but still a good twisty time. Mike Justice from Instagram writes, it's always referred to as a somewhat sequel to What Have They Done to Solange, but it's nowhere near as atmospheric or engaging. Not so much a giallo as it is a dry polizioteschi with some slasher trappings. The killer's non-scary motorcycle costume leaves a lot to be desired. And Dirty Maggot from YouTube proclaims, this has a great chase scene in the garage. The rest of the film is okay. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date on all that we're doing. Listen on Amazon, Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, and about 1 billion other podcatchers, both good and terrible. Join us on Patreon for as little as $1 per month to help support the show. Or, if you're financially inclined, select a tier that fits your budget for that extra monthly bonus content. That's patreon.com/The Hysteria Continues, all one word. And that goes for our email address as well, thehysteriacontinues@gmail.com. Now over to you, Justin.
Okay, and I just want to actually forgot to mention the talking about the film being influential. Is again, I don't know if it was the case, but the scene in the car park, underground car park, which is very suspenseful, probably the most slasherific moment in the movie, is kind of very similar to the scene with Leslie Donaldson at the beginning of Happy Birthday to Me. Which again also took place in a kind of a car park or underground car park. So it's not too much of a stretch to wonder if that was kind of lifted from that movie, considering it was in kind of it was playing cinemas in the kind of New England area in the early and latter part of 1980. So I guess that kind of all that remains is to discuss what we're covering next time. Now, am I picking for Erik?
I don't know, because we're not 100% certain when Erik is going to return. He had some obligations pop up, but maybe you can pick. Maybe we could just say we don't know what we're covering next, and we'll just see what happens.
Okay, fair enough. Well, you'll put on socials, won't you, what we're covering anyway? If you want to chime in with your thoughts on that. So
yeah, it would normally be Erik's pick, so it may still be, but if not, then Justin will probably pick something.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've got a couple of choices anyway. So, but Daniel, thank you for coming on again with your kind of wit and wisdom on what they've done to your daughters. And where can people find your podcast?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, Justin. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Nathan. My podcast is the Remedial Film Class Podcast. You can find us at all the podcatchers and YouTube. It's been a little bit since we posted. We've been retooling, and we're kind of in a hiatus here. I think we had 3 moves, 2 house purchases. So we're retooling right now. Also, somebody was titillated by a movie and didn't like it. So we're working our way through retooling what we're doing, but we've got a heck of an archive, 100 and something episodes with all kinds of fun information like the giant cavernous Godfather vagina. So check us out on YouTube and on podcatchers. Remedial Film Class Podcast. Excellent, and everyone should check that out. So thank you very much. And I guess any ideas what to play out with? I'm kind of thinking just some more of that beautiful score, probably, unless you've got any other suggestions, Daniel. I mean, if you want to hit the really action part of the score and I can sing the Papa Roach song over it, I would be down.
No,
well, we could see.
No.
Well, at least let's see what Joseph does in post. So, but yes, well, thank you for listening to the Hysteria Continues. I hope you enjoyed that trip back to Italy for some more Giallo madness. And we will be back next time with what we don't know exactly, but I'm sure you can probably guess. It's going to be slasherific.
What have they done on the Hysteria Continues?
What have they done to the Hysteria Continues? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for listening. Thanks once again, Daniel, for coming on. Always a pleasure, and hope to have you back on the show soon. So thank you for listening, guys, and say goodbye to good people. Bye, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, it was a great time. Thanks, guys, for having me on. Sorry, I never pick actual slasher movies when I come on your show, so I'm sorry for that.